Good evening, brethren. We're going to do a presentation today. It's called Response to UPA7 / Edstrom's Kingdom Travel video. In the last week or so, Edstrom has put out a counter video on our Kingdom Travel. We've done a couple videos over the years about how we think the people will travel to the kingdom, and we're talking about the premillennial kingdom. We're not talking specifically about the heavenly kingdom, which is a different travel. Obviously, that's going to be entailed with the spirit prophecy and the rod quotes that talk of a chariot, a giant chariot that's going to load up the people and take them to the heavenly kingdom. But this is about the travel from wherever the saints are, the 144,000. When the time comes, they'll have to travel back to the kingdom, which is in the Holy Land. We know this as present truth believers, that this travel is very interesting subject. And so what we want to do is respond to his video and some of his points that he made. They're quite truly amazing. If you look at how we're going to rebut what he's going to say, you're going to be amazed at just the different ways that the two different sides have views of this, and hopefully you'll be blessed by it. So please pause the video, claim the promise of John 16:13, and he will be faithful and guide us into all truth. Let's begin. All right, so our counsels for this report are from 3 Symbolic Code number 56, page 7, Spirit Prophecy. Says the Spirit Prophecy, close reasoners and logical thinkers are few. How many men in this age of the world fail to go deep enough? They only skim the surface. They will not think closely enough to see difficulties and grapple with them, and will not examine every important subject which comes before them with thoughtful, prayerful study and with sufficient caution and interest to see the real point at issue. They talk of matters which they have not fully and carefully weighed. Fundamentals of Christian Education, page 27, Testimonies for the Church, volume 4, page 361. And their second one is, some who are anxious to risk present truth on the weight of what one inspired statement seems to say or imply are thereby presumptuously or very ignorantly overlooking the weight of evidence. That's found in 3 Answer, page 41 and 42. So as we go through this study, and I think at the end of the study, you'll see that these two counsels really apply here. We believe that Eric Edstrom has presumptuously and very ignorantly overlooked the weight of evidence. And we'll prove that as we go. All right, so what is the right way to go about this study? Well, as we just showed, the right way is the weight of evidence. We have to go with that, brethren. We cannot side with one or two references and say, oh, we're going to go with these couple here, even though they look pretty straightforward, against the other more weightful statements or the many more that support a different view. We cannot side with the minority. We have to go with the majority and see where that goes. So this is very key, and it'll become clear as we go through the study. All right, so the questions for the study is, does Edstrom carefully weigh evidence, or does he place his theory upon one or two statements? Number 2, with his chariot travel idea, does he harmonize our fundamental beliefs with those one or two statements? Number 3, does he provide a type for chariot travel to the kingdom and ignore the Exodus travel as a type? Number 4, what is the preponderance of evidence for the travel, land or chariot? Which travel harmonizes with the whole message? See, that's very important. We have to make sure that everything harmonizes, and we'll see some proof of the counsel for that as we go. All right, so let's take a look at the first statements by Edstrom based on his recent video.
So the first one, 1TG, number 31, page 6 and 7, it reads, In the days of Moses, the Lord smote but one stream, the Red Sea. And this is commenting on Isaiah 11, verse 15. And one nation, Egypt. That's the type. But now the Lord promises to smite every stream, all seven, and causes people from the four corners of the earth to reach their land without so much as getting their feet wet. Although today, as in Moses' day, such a thing seems utterly impossible, yet it is certain that just as God made it possible then, he will now too. The battle is the Lord, and the will is ours. We have nothing to do but to obey his voice. That is our only duty, brother, sister. So this idea that he highlights that the people are not even going to get their feet wet implies that they're going to literally walk over dry land. Well, it's also possible that if you get on a chariot, that your feet won't get wet either. Have we thought about that? So the first one.
All right, let's go over what he just said. Close reasoners and logical thinkers. That's what we want to be. Edstrom. So this idea that he highlights, in referring to yours truly, that the people are not even going to get their feet wet implies that they walk over dry land. Well, it's also possible that if you get on a chariot that your feet won't get wet either. Have you thought about that? Oh, brother. We have to talk about this. Let's go to our next slide here. All right, let's carefully analyze the statement itself. In the days of Moses, the Lord smote but one stream, the Red Sea, and one nation, Egypt. But now the Lord promises to smite every stream, all seven, and causes people from the four corners of the earth to reach their land without so much as getting their feet wet. Although today, as it is in Moses' day, such a thing seems utterly impossible, yet is certain that just as God made it possible then, he will now too. The battle is the Lord's, the will is ours. We have nothing to do but to obey his voice. That is our only duty, brother, sister. 1TG number 31, page 7 and 8. Okay, let's look at the statement and break it down. The context, number one. Deliverance through the miracle of God splitting the Red Sea. That's the context that the statement is about. And the action, the Lord promises same deliverance with the splitting, smite, every stream, body of water, to ensure the safe travel to the kingdom as he did before. The result, this will be a seemingly impossible work, but it will be done. God's promise. From every land, four corners, he delivers his people just as he did in Exodus. So here we see that when we read the statement, as it is applying for us to know this lesson, is very clear. But Edstrom wants to spiritualize it away. He wants to say, it's called gaslighting, brother. And he wants to say, you see what you see there? No, you don't really see it. It's something else. You got to think about something else. You can't really read what you see. You understand what you read. You know? It's just, oh, brethren, this false teacher needs to be exposed. And we're going to do that more and more as we go through this lesson. All right, types and symbols. Thus, through types and symbols, he makes wise the simple and confounds the prudent by showing where there is no type, there is no truth. So Shepherd Rod, Volume 2, page 10. One nation, as it were, will say to another nation, come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Micah 4:2. Thus our work has also as its type the Exodus movement going out of Egypt, established itself in the promised land. As they were freed from the Egyptian bondage, so we shall be freed from the world's yoke. And just as they possessed the land and set up the kingdom, so we, if we make their mistakes, are stepping stones to its success. 1TG number 9, page 11. All right, so we see once again, brethren, more preponderance that the Exodus moving of how they were going out of Egypt is the type. You see that clearly what it's saying? And so this is bringing in more clarity to the matter, that where there's no type, there's no truth. And the Exodus movement coming out of Egypt, which is nothing more than physically leaving Egypt and going, walking, and physically traveling to the kingdom, is the type. Very clear. All right, so let's look at more counsel because it's really needed at this point. The followers of Christ take time to examine for themselves what the Word itself says, not what God's enemies try to make it say. White House Recruiter, page 68. See, this is very important, brethren. He is trying to make the statement say something it's not making. So we have to be very cautious of Satan's cunning workers. In considering the several scriptures bearing on this point and on kindred points in question, we must base our conclusions solely on what? On the weight of evidence, so that we may not only know all the truth, but also teach nothing but the truth. That's found in tract 9, page 6. So let's look at the preponderance of evidence. We've been talking about that now, so it's time for us to put up what we're talking about. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea world, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the 7 streams, and make men go over dry shod. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like it was to Israel in the day he came out of the land of Egypt. Isaiah 11, 10-16. Very evidently. Now, this is very, very powerful, brother. We didn't show that in maybe in both of our videos. I'm not sure. I don't recall. But this is very powerful. Very evidently, then, the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night that so gloriously led the Hebrew host out of Egypt foreshadowed an even greater and more glorious protective covering when? Victoriously leading Israel today, not only where? On their way to the land of the promise, but all the while they are there. Wow. Did you just read that? On their way to the land of promise. Note, not only on their way to the land of promise. So we wanted to highlight that and bring that to you as more evidence, brethren, that the rod makes very clear. Except people like Edstrom that want to spiritualize what you're reading. He wants to gaslight us, okay, brethren? He's a very good gaslighter. He's done that with the Storehouse situation. He has gaslighted many references from the rod, saying, oh, you see what it says there? It don't really mean that. And he goes into private interpretations. This is why we're telling people, and we did a blog, we did a post on Hear Ye the Rod blog as well. He is a leader of perdition paths. He's going to lead you down into perdition, brethren, if you continue to follow this false teacher. We hate to be so straightforward and firm, but this is the case with this man. All right, from Isaiah 11, we see that the Lord is to set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, Isaiah 11:11. And that when he does so, he will prepare a way for them like it was to Israel in the day that he came out of the land of Egypt, Isaiah 11:16, and that's found in one answer, page 25. Was the preparation done through hardship and miracles from the Lord on the way there? Was that the preparation? Of course it was, brethren. Or just a comfortable space zoom to the Holy Land. Let's be real. Remember, he could have very well zoomed the people over, as he showed with transporting Enoch, Elijah, and Philip. So we know in the history that it was not beyond reality or beyond ability from the Lord to transport his people. What an easy deal that is for him. But did he do it? Of course not. He did the preparation. He got them ready. He prepared the way. And when the time came for hardship and miracles, he made a way for them. This is all what it's talking about. In the day that he came out of Egypt, like it was that time. So to take that and all of us say, well, like it was out of the land of Egypt, is a zooming in the chariot. It's falsehood, brother. It's totally misapplied private interpretation. All right, according to Scripture, Jew and Arab alike are to go out of the promised land and the meek of the earth to march into it. Here, how are they to get there? Okay, now the rod starts to go into our topic that we want to talk. How are they to get there? And who is to open the way? The answer to these questions we shall find in. Now it goes into Zechariah 14, 4 and 5. You can read that at your leisure, but it's very clear that he's now going to show us how we're to get there. You see, you listen to the rod, brother. You don't listen to private interpreters like Edstrom, who tries to spiritualize away what you read. See, they're good at gaslighting. We have to be very cautious of these false teachers. Now, this is a continuation of that prior quote. The Lord himself, you see, is to open the way for the returning of his people. And then it quoted Isaiah 11:11, 12, and 16. And it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. Now here's very key. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And there shall be a what? Highway for the remnant of his people. And you know what? If you're going to be with Edstrom, you know what this highway is? It's a space corridor. Brother, this is getting ridiculous what this man has done. Which shall be left from Assyria, like it was to Egypt. Okay, there we go again. Like it was to Israel in the day that he come out of the land of Egypt. So we get more preponderance. This is another quote from the rod, 2TG number 41, page 13 and 14. The preponderance is starting to add up. All right, let's go on to more that Edstrom wants to comment on. 2TG number 46, page 46 to 48.
Then Peralta goes to this reference in 2TG 46, page 36 and 37. Watch carefully. It reads, "Do we see then, as plain as we should, that to fail to heed the truth of this most momentous event in all church history is to forfeit the gift of miracles, fitness for translation, and the right to live and reign with Christ during 1,000 years? We dare not let the enemy cheat us of this new heart fitness for heaven. This ingathering is indeed to be the second Exodus, and is to be exactly as the Lord has said, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt," quoting Isaiah 11, verses 11 and 16. So he's showing this, that there's a second Exodus that's comparable to the first. But look what Peralta notes. This is Peralta's note, not Brother Houda. Peralta claims that the type shows that he's to recover his people by leading them physically into the land, quote, exactly as he did in the first Exodus. Excuse me, but that's not what Brother Houda's saying. He said exactly as the Lord has said, pointing to type, anti-type. And then Peralta claims no zooming in the type. I guess this is the word he uses, zooming. No chariots in type. Well, duh, because the type is different than the anti-type. And Peralta doesn't understand this. This is his fatal flaw. Then,
okay, let's go over that reference again. This ingathering is indeed to be the second Exodus, and it is to be exactly as the Lord has said. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, like as it was to Israel in the day that he come up out of the land of Egypt. Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to say is that this is exactly what we were saying, exactly as the Lord has said. So when the Lord has said it is to be as it was to Israel in the day that he come where? Up out of the land of Egypt. Okay? So when those people come up out of the land of Egypt, were they loaded onto a chariot and then zoom right over to the kingdom? No. They physically went to the kingdom. That's how they came up out of the land of Egypt. So the Lord is saying it's exactly the same way. It's simple reading of the text. But like I said, Edstrom wants to gaslight us again. All right, but let's look at Edstrom's fatal flaw. Not one type was provided in his representation in his video to show God's people zoomed over in a chariot to his land in all history. Search and see. But there is a type for his people being delivered by land to his holy land, the Exodus deliverance type. So, brethren, we have one type in our history, and the references from the rod clearly show that this is the way it's going to be. It's the Exodus deliverance type. And so to cross out our type and substitute something we have no type for, that's Edstrom's fatal flaw. And we're talking about fatal flaw. Well, there it is. That's it. That's it. The truths most plainly revealed in the Bible have been involved in doubt and darkness by learned men, who, with the pretense of great wisdom, teach that the scriptures have a mystical, a secret, spiritual meaning not apparent in the language employed. These men are false teachers. It was such a class that Jesus declared, "You know not the scriptures, neither the power of God." Mark 12:22. The language of the Bible should be explained according to its obvious meaning, unless a symbol or figure is employed. Christ has given the promise, "If any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine." John 7:17. If men would but take the Bible as it reads, if there were no false teachers to mislead and confuse their minds, a work would be accomplished that would make angels glad and would bring into the fold of Christ thousands upon thousands who are now wandering in error. Oh, brethren, such beautiful counsel given to Great Controversy, page 598. So here we see the problem with Edstrom is he's not taking it as he reads. He wants to spiritualize it away because he has a theory in mind, and he has a misplaced theory, and therefore all these clear texts, all these sensible preponderance of evidence must be pushed aside because he can't read it as it reads. He must spiritualize it away, gaslight you and me to say, "You see what you see? You don't see what you see. Let me tell you what you see." Okay, the involatile harmonization rule. Now this is key because we're going to go into an area that's important and it kind of puts the final nail in the coffin about what's going on here. Let us remember always to observe the involatile rule that an interpretation of one inspired statement must harmonize with all other related statements. Some who are anxious to risk present truth on the weight of what one inspired statement seems to say or imply are thereby presumptuously or very ignorantly overlooking the weight of evidence. Others are doing this through short-sightedness, while still others are doing it to prop up certain cherished ideas of their own. I will say that the last one is most likely Edstrom's issue. He wants to prop up his cherished idea. He has made a video recently that he admitted that UPA and him had a lesson to unlearn. Well, this is another one that he may really consider that he has to publicly acknowledge he has to unlearn. So hopefully he'll be, on the right path here, but not so sure based on his history, brethren. Okay, so let's go back again. An interpretation of one inspired statement must harmonize with all related statements. So this is a harmonization rule that we need to apply here on our subject. All right, so once we know that, we're going to go into this question. How does Edstrom harmonize the following? Okay, so he has the very seemingly straightforward reference that the chariot view is based upon. We are therefore not to worry about a possibility of anyone's hurting the work of God. Neither are we to worry about how we are to get to Mount Zion, but are to make sure to be ready to board the chariot of God when the angels cry out, all aboard. Let us ever remember that those who once wrecked the ancient kingdom and cast out its people shall now come to build it up and cast out the horns of the Gentiles who now rule the land. So even our enemies of yesterday, God puts working for us today. 1TG, number 11, page 13. So remember in the harmonization rule, and remember the Rod calls it involatile. In other words, you can't escape it. It's very important. We want to take this statement, the one that he relies on first and foremost, the go-to statement. We want to see if that can be harmonized with the following. In our core beliefs, our fundamental beliefs, and that's found in Fundamental Beliefs, track page 12 to 13, we read a timeline, and we see number 4 is talking about the destruction of the first fruit of the terrors from among the first fruits. That's Ezekiel 9. Number 5, immediately thereafter, the angels let loose the 4 winds. So the time of trouble happens right after that. And number 6, that the angels letting loose the 4 winds of the 4 corners does not anticipate a world war, but rather a worldwide decree enforced throughout Babylon. So soon after the winds are let loose, the formation of the Sunday law begins. And number 7, subsequently, the time of Jacob's trouble for the 144,000, the sons of Jacob, logically develops on their way home, Genesis 32:1 and 24, to the land of their fathers. Okay, so number 7, we see clearly that Jacob's time of trouble is going to happen while the saints are on their way home to the kingdom. Okay, and this happens after Ezekiel 9. Now, one of the things I want to bring out real quick on a side note is that, and we've went over this in some other videos, that we have to remember number 6 is not saying that the Sunday law is set up in that time period right there. In other words, immediately after the 4 winds are let loose and Michael's standing up, number 6 is not saying, brethren, and I repeat this, it's not saying the Sunday law is set up right after Ezekiel 9. This is impossible based on, we've went over this in other videos, so we can't go into all the facts now. But getting back to the subject here, after Ezekiel 9, Jacob, and the rod shows you the type, that shows the action, and you can look at 32:1, Genesis 32:1 and 32:24. It's describing Jacob as he is physically traveling on his way home, that he encounters his time of trouble, his struggling with the angel, and his sense of doom with Jacob approaching. All these things are happening. In fact, we've done videos on this as well. You can watch our Jacob's Time of Trouble videos. But he's 90% on the way physically to the kingdom when he experiences this trouble. So it's well on the way. Now, did Jacob leave Laban's land and zoom over to the kingdom? No, he physically traveled to the kingdom. So the rod's timeline is showing this is going to happen after Ezekiel 9. So we have to go back and say that how does Edstrom harmonize the zooming after Ezekiel 9 to the kingdom with our fundamental beliefs, the trouble that occurs on the physical travel back to the kingdom? So this is not our concern, that's his concern, because if we go with our concern, we have no issue with harmonization. We've already saw that once the Ezekiel 9 happens and the church judgment is over with, the saints continue and go physically. Now, we're not talking about just walking alone. We're talking about possibly on a vehicle of some type. Remember that in the rod, it talks about automobiles as being chariots. We don't have that quote handy, but you can definitely find that in one of the tracks, that the rod goes into pictures of the evolution of chariots. So it calls the automobiles of today the chariots. And so we know that in the type, the people left Egypt on animals, on chariots. And so there's other type of riding that's going to be involved, I believe, according to the type, on the way to the kingdom. So not necessarily just walking, although in Isaiah it says they will run without, or is it Jeremiah? I don't remember, run without being tired. So definitely after Ezekiel 9, there's going to be some sort of, as we know in Ezekiel 10, or outpouring of the Spirit, of fire, coals of fire. It's going to strengthen the brethren. So this walking is not going to wear them out. They're going to have this newfold strength from the outpouring, as spoken of in Ezekiel 10. So let's look at our conclusion now. Edstrom fails to go over the weight of evidence. It's pretty obvious. Number 2, he fails to harmonize our fundamental beliefs, particularly Jacob's time of trouble, with his chariot zoom idea. And see, the burden is on Edstrom. He's got to show us how that harmonizes, because if he doesn't, he's breaking the involuntary rule of harmonization. Number 3, fails to provide a type of group or corporate transport of God's people to his kingdom. He fails to admit the obvious Exodus deliverers type. We already have a type. So he has to throw that out, and he has to say, well, just forget about type. We don't need type to show anything about the transfer to the kingdom. Just ignore that. Gaslight it. Oh, boy, brethren. Number 4, spiritualize away straight texts and their meaning, preferring to call them metaphors. You know, Edstrom, in his video, he goes into quite a lot of false context examples of metaphors. And so the straight texts that we've shown you, he wants to label them as metaphors. They're not really what you read, you know. And so we went into that pretty clearly here. Number 5, continues on his false path of teaching error and remains steadfast in it. And that's something that's very concerning, brethren. We've had to do part 1 and part 2 of our Who is UPA, and you can watch that on our videos. We go into his false teachings and some serious situations with his teachings, brethren. And first and foremost, we'll just do a little recap, is that he believes that if you teach the pure rod, no new codes, everything perfect, nothing out of line, and you publish that from your home, you can pocket the tithes and just have a little storehouse at your own house. And, keep your bank account rolling with your own money and put it aside in your own home to proclaim the message. This is so convoluted, so false when you look at the whole message of the Lord. And but he's steadfast in it. And so we've already exposed all that in videos about storehouse on our station. But the bottom line is one's only safety will be in the teaching of Elijah, for there will be no other voice of timely truth and authority to whom one may turn. Any others will lead their victims blindfolded into perdition. So this is our warning, and we may do another video, brethren, that will expose more of the hypocrisy from this organization, particularly from their leader, Edstrom. Just to warn you, we've got to warn. The Spirit of Prophecy says that false teachers must be opposed. And I'm trying to see if I can find that quote for you. Oh boy, where did it go? Okay, yeah, that's found in Testimonies to Ministers, page 55. And basically it reads, I'll read it real quickly here so you can understand where we're coming from and why we have to do this video. False teachers may appear to be very zealous for the work of God and may expend the means to bring their theories before the world and the church. But as they mingle error with truth, their message is one of deception and will lead souls into false paths. They are to be met and opposed, not because they're bad men, but because they are teachers of falsehood, endeavoring to put upon falsehood the stamp of truth. Again, that can be found in Testimonies to Ministers, page 55. So we have found clearly, brethren, after many years of going over this man's teaching, that you have to be very aware that you will be led into perdition if you continue to follow such thievery as to keep the tithes in your pocket and your own home storehouse, even though you think you're doing right. This is just terrible abominations. But anyway, that concludes our presentation. We hope you've been enlightened about the true situation that we're having to deal with here. And may the Lord continue to guide you into all truth. That is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.